Have you ever watched someone's entire world fall apart? Not because of money problems, not because of sickness, but because everyone, and I mean everyone, gave up on them too soon? This is the story of a woman who spent her fortune searching for a miracle in every corner of the earth. She flew to America, she flew to Europe, she begged the best doctors money could buy, and they all told her the same lie: there's nothing we can do. But God had other plans, and those plans involved a man she wouldn't even look at twice. A man wearing a dusty security uniform, a man who was supposed to just open her gates and keep his mouth shut. What he found will make you question everything you thought you knew about money, power, and miracles. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now because you're going to want more of this. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Okay, let's begin. For 9 long years, the little girl kept tapping her right ear. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't just a habit, it was a signal, a quiet scream that nobody was listening to. Her mother, Grace Okonkwo, had done everything humanly possible. She flew her daughter to the best hospitals in London. She took her to specialists in Dubai. She even chartered a private jet to Boston. Twice. To see doctors who charged more money per consultation than most Nigerians earn in 5 years. Every single one of them said the same thing. "I'm sorry, madam. The damage is neurological. It's permanent. Your daughter will never hear." Grace spent hundreds of millions of naira. She wept in hospital corridors from Harley Street to Massachusetts General. She prayed at every mountain. She sowed seeds at every church. Nothing changed. Her daughter Blessing was still trapped in silence. But then something happened that nobody, not even Grace herself, could have predicted. The answer wasn't in a foreign hospital. It wasn't in an expensive machine. It was in the hands of a young man she had hired to guard her gate. A man she barely looked at. A man whose education was wasted because Nigeria had no jobs for him. And what he pulled from that child's ear, it will leave you speechless. Grace Okonkwo wasn't just rich, she was untouchable. As the CEO of Okonkwo Energy Limited, one of the largest indigenous oil servicing companies in the Niger Delta, Grace commanded respect everywhere she went. She had offices in Port Harcourt, Abuja, and Houston. She sat on international boards. She owned a sprawling estate in the prestigious GRA Phase 2 area of Port Harcourt, protected by armed guards and electric fencing that could fry a cow. Her convoy, 3 bulletproof Land Cruisers and a backup Hilux, moved through the streets of Port Harcourt like a presidential motorcade. People scattered when they saw her vehicles. Even the traffic police saluted without asking for something. But all the money in the world couldn't fix one thing. Her daughter couldn't hear. Blessing was 9 years old. She had never heard the sound of rainfall on a zinc roof. She had never heard her mother's voice saying, "I love you." She had never heard the chirping of birds in the mango trees that lined their estate. She had never heard her own laughter. She was born that way. Grace tried everything. She took Blessing to the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital. They ran tests, MRIs, CT scans. Specialists poked and prodded. They charged millions and shook their heads. "Congenital hearing loss, madam. The auditory nerve is damaged. We're very sorry." Grace refused to accept it. She flew Blessing to Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. They did more scans, more tests. Same answer. She tried Germany, Switzerland, India, everywhere. Same answer, same sympathetic headshake, same expensive bill. "Learn sign language, madam. Teach her to lip read. Accept it. Your daughter will never hear." But Grace couldn't accept it. Because Blessing was all she had left. Her husband Emmanuel had died in a brutal car crash on the East-West Road, one of those terrible accidents involving a tanker and a pothole the size of a grave. Just 3 months before Blessing was born. Emmanuel never got to hold his baby girl, never got to see her smile, never got to know that his only child would grow up in a world of silence. So Grace kept searching, kept spending, kept hoping that maybe, just maybe, the next doctor would have an answer. She didn't know that the answer was already inside her compound, wearing a faded security uniform, sweeping her driveway. The Okonkwo estate sat on 5 acres of prime land in GRA Phase 2, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Port Harcourt. From the outside, it looked like paradise. The walls were painted brilliant white, topped with razor wire and motion sensor cameras. The main house was a 3-story architectural masterpiece with columns that stretched to the sky. The gardens were maintained by a team of 6 gardeners who trimmed every hedge to perfection. There was a fountain in the center courtyard. Imported Italian marble. That ran 24 hours a day. But inside the house there was silence. Not the peaceful kind. This silence was suffocating, heavy, like a wet blanket thrown over everything. The domestic staff, the cooks, the drivers, the cleaners, the gatemen, moved like ghosts. They whispered instead of speaking. They tiptoed instead of walking. They had learned quickly. Madame Grace didn't like noise. No music played in that house, no television, no laughter echoing through the high ceilings. Just silence. And somewhere in that silence, a mother was drowning. Grace sat in her private study most evenings, staring at the large family portrait hanging above her mahogany desk. Emmanuel was there. Strong, smiling, alive. Blessing was painted as a baby in her mother's arms. The artist had captured them perfectly, a family frozen in time, before the accident, before the silence. Grace would sit there for hours, drinking expensive wine that tasted like ash in her mouth, wondering what she had done to deserve this. Why had God taken her husband? Why had God given her a daughter who would never hear her father's name spoken aloud? The guilt sat on her chest like an anchor she couldn't lift. If she hadn't sent Emmanuel to that meeting in Wari that night, if she hadn't insisted he drive back the same evening instead of sleeping over, maybe he'd still be alive. Maybe Blessing wouldn't have been born under so much stress and trauma. Maybe things would be different. So Grace did the only thing she knew how to do. She spent money. More specialists, more tests, more hospitals. And every single one of them said, "Sorry, madam, nothing can be done." Grace didn't know that the answer wasn't in a hospital overseas. It was standing at her gate right now, holding a broom, trying to figure out how to pay for his sister's kidney dialysis. Daniel arrived on a Thursday morning in November. The sky was gray and heavy, the kind of sky that threatens flooding in Port Harcourt. He stood outside the pedestrian gate of the Okonkwo estate, gripping his worn duffel bag, trying to steady his breathing. This was his last chance. His sister, back in their village in Bielsa, was getting worse. The dialysis clinic was demanding N120-000 by Monday or they would stop treatment. His phone was full of missed calls from the hospital, full of threats. He needed this job. He didn't care that he had a degree in microbiology from Rivers State University. He didn't care that he graduated with second-class upper honors. In Nigeria, a degree without connections is just expensive paper. He needed the salary, even if it meant opening gates for people who wouldn't even remember his name. The head of the domestic staff, Mrs. Patience, met him at the security post. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a permanent frown. The kind of woman who could spot a lazy worker from across the compound and fire them before lunch. She looked Daniel up and down like he was a suspect in a crime. "You are Daniel?" she asked, her voice cutting through the humid air. "Yes, ma." Daniel bowed slightly in respect. "You will work the gate. You will sweep the compound. You will make sure no area boys or beggars disturb this estate. And most importantly," she stepped closer, her perfume mixing with the smell of rain, "you will stay away from the child." Daniel nodded quickly. "I understand, ma." "Do you?" Mrs. Patience raised an eyebrow. Because the last gateman didn't understand. He thought he could play with the girl. Thought he could make her smile. He was fired the same day. We found him packing his things before sunset. She leaned in even closer. "That child is not your concern. She is deaf. She cannot hear you. She doesn't need your pity or your jokes or your nonsense. If Madam catches you anywhere near her daughter, you will not just lose this job. I will make sure you never work in Port Harcourt again. Am I clear?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, ma. Crystal clear." Mrs. Patience studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Follow me." As they walked through the compound toward the gatehouse, Daniel kept his eyes down, but he couldn't help noticing things. The silence was unnatural for a Nigerian home. No sounds of generators humming, no voices chatting, no laughter from the staff quarters. It felt like a graveyard. And then he saw her. A small girl, maybe 9 years old, sitting on the front steps of the main house. She was arranging white pebbles in a straight line, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't look up as they passed, didn't acknowledge them, because she couldn't hear their footsteps. But what caught Daniel's attention was something else. The way she kept touching her right ear. Tap, 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 and the tiny wince of pain that flashed across her face each time she did it. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen that look before. Years ago, back in the village. His cousin had the same habit before they discovered a massive ear infection. He didn't say anything, he just kept walking. But his heart whispered something he couldn't ignore. Pay attention, Daniel. God is showing you something. Days turned into weeks. Daniel settled into the routine. Wake up at 5 a.m., open the gate for Madam's convoy at 6:30 a.m., sweep the driveway, check the perimeter, close the gate at night. Simple, straightforward, boring. But he couldn't stop watching the girl. Every morning the same thing happened. Blessing would come outside and sit alone in the garden near the gatehouse. She had expensive toys. Remote control cars, huge dolls, tablets. But she didn't play with them. She just sat there, arranging stones or drawing in the sand with a stick. She looked so lonely. The other staff avoided her, not out of cruelty but out of fear. Mrs. Patience had made it clear, don't touch the child, don't even look at her for too long. Some of the drivers whispered near the gatehouse, chewing cola nut and gossiping. That girl in our spiritual case, Joseph the senior driver muttered one afternoon. Her papa die before she born deaf. E no be coincidence, na village people. Daniel frowned. Don't say that. She's just a child. Joseph laughed bitterly. You think say you wise past doctor, even Oyibo doctors way charge millions no fit cure am? You think say na ordinary sickness? But Daniel saw something different. He saw a lonely child, a girl who sat by the rose bushes and pressed her small fingers against the petals, trying to feel what she couldn't hear. He saw the way she'd watch her mother's convoy leave every morning. 3 black SUVs disappearing through the gate, and how her shoulders would slump just a little lower. Nobody hugged her goodbye. Nobody waved. She was invisible in her own home, and she kept touching her ear. Tap, tap, tap. Wince. One hot afternoon. The kind of Port Harcourt heat that makes your shirt stick to your back. Daniel was trimming a small hedge near the garden when he saw Blessing struggling with a colorful kite. The string was tangled in a terrible knot. Her small fingers pulled at it, yanked at it, but the knot only got tighter. Frustration twisted her face. Her mouth opened in a silent cry of anger. Daniel looked around. Mrs. Patience was inside the house. The cameras didn't cover this corner of the garden. He shouldn't interfere, but he couldn't just watch her suffer. He crouched low and tapped the ground hard, creating a vibration. Blessing looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, dark, defensive. Daniel smiled gently. He pointed at the kite in her hands, then at his own hands. Let me help. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then slowly, she handed the kite through the fence. Daniel worked quickly. His rough hands, calloused from manual labor, untangled the knot in seconds. He handed it back. Blessing looked at the string, then at him. And then something miraculous happened. She smiled. Just a tiny smile. A flicker at the corner of her mouth. But it was enough. Daniel smiled back. He gave her a small wave. She waved back. That night, lying on the thin mattress in the boys' quarters behind the gatehouse, Daniel couldn't sleep. He thought about that wave. Such a small thing, but it felt like everything. The next morning, before the sun rose, he fashioned something out of palm fronds, a skill he'd learned in the village. He wove the leaves into the shape of a small bird. He left it on the stone bench where Blessing always sat. He didn't wait to see if she'd find it. But when he checked later from the gatehouse window, the bird was gone. In its place, a small piece of paper held down by a pebble. On it, a drawing of a smiley face. Daniel pressed that paper to his chest and closed his eyes. "Lord," he whispered, "let me help this child, show me how." He didn't know it yet, but God was already answering, and the answer would cost him everything. Over the next few weeks, something beautiful developed. Daniel and Blessing created their own secret language. When Mrs. Patience wasn't watching, he would leave her small treasures: a perfectly round stone from the driveway, a yellow butterfly he'd caught and released, a flower that looked like a star. She would leave him drawings. He learned her signs. Not the formal sign language her expensive tutors taught her, but the personal ones she'd invented herself. When she tapped her chest twice, it meant, "I'm happy." When she pointed at the high walls, it meant, "I feel trapped." When she pressed both palms together, it meant, "I feel safe." And slowly, carefully, she started using that last sign around him. Safe. Daniel treasured that more than his salary. But secrets don't stay secret long in a house with cameras and gossip. One evening, Mrs. Patience cornered him near the generator shed. "I have been watching you," she hissed. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Ma, I haven't." "You think I'm blind?" Mrs. Patience's voice was sharp as broken glass. "I see you looking at the girl. I see your little games." "Ma, she's just lonely. I'm not causing any trouble." Mrs. Patience stepped closer, her finger wagging in his face. "Listen to me carefully, Daniel. You are a gateman. You are nobody to that child. You are here to sweep floors and open gates, that's it. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ma." "If Madam finds out you've been interfering with her daughter, you will be finished. No reference, no severance, and I will personally make sure no compound in GRA will hire you." Her eyes were ice cold. "Think about your sick sister in the village. Do you want her to die because you wanted to play hero?" She walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement like a death march. That night, Daniel sat on his bed staring at the cracked ceiling. He thought about his sister lying in that hospital bed. The bills, the salary he desperately needed. He thought about Blessing. Her lonely eyes. Her pain. He thought about the dark shadow he'd seen deep in her ear when the sunlight hit it just right during their secret moments together. Mrs. Patience's words echoed, "Fix what cannot be fixed." But what if it could be fixed? What if everyone was wrong? Daniel picked up his Bible and held it close. "Lord, I don't know what to do. If I lose this job, my sister dies, but I can't ignore what I'm seeing." He waited for an answer. None came. Just the distant hum of the estate's massive generator. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the Port Harcourt moon hung low and orange through the pollution. Inside his heart, a war was beginning. A war between survival and doing what was right. He didn't know it yet, but that war was about to end. Because tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning came with a strange chill in the air. Harmattan was beginning. That dry season wind that blows dust across West Africa. Daniel was sweeping near the main house when he heard it. A soft thud. Then nothing. He stopped. Listened. Another sound. Like a cry trapped in a throat. His heart jumped. He looked around. The compound was empty. He followed the sound to the side entrance of the house, and there was Blessing. She was sitting on the cold tiles, hunched over, both hands clamped over her right ear. Her face was twisted in agony. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but no sound came from her mouth. She was screaming in silence. Daniel dropped his broom and ran. He forgot Mrs. Patience. He forgot the rules. He forgot everything except the child in pain. He knelt in front of her, his hands shaking. "Blessing, look at me." She opened her eyes. Red, wet, terrified. She signed desperately. "Ear, fire, hurts." Daniel's chest felt like it was being crushed. "Can I look?" He signed carefully. "I'll be gentle, I promise." She hesitated. Fear flickered across her face. She'd been poked by too many doctors, hurt too many times. But then she looked at Daniel, the man who made her the palm-frond bird, the man who never hurt her. Slowly, she leaned forward. Trust. This child. who had been examined by the best specialists in the world. Trusted the gateman. Daniel swallowed hard. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small flashlight he used for night patrol. He clicked it on. "Tilt your head," he motioned. She tilted. Daniel leaned in close, holding his breath. He shone the light directly into her ear canal. And there it was. Deep inside, past where a casual glance would see, was something dark, dense. It looked almost like a stone wedged deep in the canal. But it was bigger than he remembered seeing before. It had shifted, and it looked angry. Daniel's breath stopped. How had every specialist missed this? How had every scan overlooked it? His mind raced back to his village. His uncle had gone deaf for 6 years until the local nurse pulled out a massive blockage of hardened wax and dirt. The doctors in the city had called it nerve damage too. His hands trembled. "Blessing," he signed slowly. "There's something in your ear, something that shouldn't be there." Her eyes went wide. "We need to tell your mother," he signed. Panic exploded across her face. Her hands moved frantically. "No, no doctors, they hurt me, always hurt, never help, please." Daniel's heart shattered. He understood. 9 years of specialists, 9 years of procedures, 9 years of pain with no relief. She had learned that help meant suffering. He took her small hands in his rough ones. He looked into her eyes. "I would never hurt you," he whispered, hoping she could read his lips. "Never." He sat with her until the tears dried, until her hands stopped shaking. Then he walked back to the gatehouse, his mind spinning. He knew what he'd seen. But what could he do? Tell Madame Grace? She would look at him, a gateman, and laugh. Or worse, fire him for touching her daughter. She would call more specialists, the same ones who'd missed it for years. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He paced the small room, his mind racing. He thought about the expensive medical bills he'd seen in the trash, millions of naira every month for consultations. If he was right, this was a scandal. If he was wrong, he was a criminal. "Lord," he whispered, his voice cracking, "what do you want from me?" Silence. Just the ticking of the cheap wall clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. He thought about his younger brother who died of malaria because they couldn't afford the drugs. He'd watched him fade, watched him burn with fever. Daniel had promised himself that day, never again. "I'll never stand by while a child suffers if I have the power to stop it." But this was different. This wasn't his brother. This was the daughter of the most powerful woman in River State. And he was nobody. Daniel stopped pacing. He reached under his bed and pulled out his small first aid kit. Inside was a pair of fine-tipped tweezers, the kind used for removing splinters. He'd sterilized them yesterday with methylated spirits. He looked at the tweezers. He looked at his hands. "God," he breathed, "I'm scared. I'm so scared. But if this is what you're asking." He remembered his pastor's words from Sunday service. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead. He made a decision. Tomorrow, if Blessing showed pain again, he would act. He would trust what his eyes had seen, even if it cost him everything. Even if it meant prison. He climbed into bed, heart pounding like a talking drum. Sleep wouldn't come, but a strange peace did. The kind of peace that comes when you've decided to jump off the cliff and trust that God will catch you. The next evening came too fast. Madame Grace was still at the office in Transamadi. A board meeting was running late. The house was quiet. Daniel was doing his rounds near the main building when he heard it. A crash. Then a muffled cry. He ran. He didn't care about the rules anymore. He burst through the side door. Blessing was lying on the marble floor, curled into a ball. A flower vase lay shattered beside her. Both her hands were clamped over her right ear. Her face was purple with agony. She was rocking back and forth, her mouth open in a silent scream. Daniel dropped to his knees. Glass crunched under his boots. I'm here. She looked at him, eyes rolling back in pain. She grabbed his hand and pressed it against her ear, begging him to make it stop. Daniel looked at the ear. The skin around it was red and swollen. The dark mass was pushing outward now, visible even without light. It was causing massive pressure. Footsteps were coming. He could hear Mrs. Patience shouting from the kitchen. What was that noise? He had seconds, maybe less. Daniel reached into his pocket. He pulled out the sterilized tweezers wrapped in clean tissue. He'd been carrying them all day, just in case. His breath came in short bursts. Lord, he whispered, guide my hands, please. Blessing looked up at him. She saw the tool. Fear spiked in her eyes. But then the pain washed over it. She looked at Daniel, really looked at him, and gave a tiny nod. Trust. Daniel steadied himself. He took a deep breath. He gently pinned her shoulder with one arm and moved the tweezers toward her ear canal. Stay still, he prayed. His hand shook once, then steadied. He was a gateman, yes. But he was also a man who'd stitched his own cuts in the village, who'd helped his grandmother with her eye medicine. He focused. He felt the metal tip touch the object. It was hard, dense, sticky. He hooked the edge. Hold on, Blessing. He pulled. Resistance. It was stuck fast, cemented by years of build-up. He pulled again, slower, more steady pressure. Squelch. Something gave way. Blessing arched her back, her eyes squeezing shut. With one final careful tug, the object slid free. It landed in Daniel's palm. He stared at it, his stomach turning. It was horrifying. A dense black plug, almost the size of a large marble, made of hardened wax, dried blood, dirt, and what looked like the remains of a tiny insect, all of it calcified into a stone-like mass that had completely sealed her ear canal. Daniel stared at it, his hands trembling. But before he could react, Blessing gasped. Not a silent gasp, a real one. Air whistled in her throat. Her hand flew to her ear, her eyes snapped open, wider than he'd ever seen them. She sat up suddenly, looking around the hallway like she'd landed on a different planet. Then she froze. She pointed at the antique grandfather clock standing against the wall. The clock that had been in this house since before she was born. The clock she'd walked past 1,000 times without noticing. Her mouth opened. A sound came out. Rough, broken, unpracticed. Like a rusty door opening for the first time. Tick, she whispered. Daniel's tears fell instantly. Hot, fast. Yes, Blessing. That's the clock. You can hear it. Blessing's whole body trembled. She touched her throat, feeling the vibration of her own voice. Her eyes filled with wonder, fear, hope. She looked at Daniel. Her mouth opened again. One word. The first real word she'd ever spoken. A word she must have practiced in her head 1,000,000 times, watching her mother's lips. Mama, she croaked. Daniel sobbed. Yes, yes. And then heavy footsteps thundered down the hall. What is happening here? Daniel looked up. Madame Grace Okonkwo stood in the doorway. She'd just arrived home. She was flanked by 2 armed mobile police officers. Her security detail. Her face was a mask of fury. Her eyes locked on her daughter on the floor, surrounded by broken glass, and the gateman kneeling beside her. And then she saw the blood on Daniel's hands. A tiny smear from where the blockage had torn the delicate skin upon exit. What have you done? Grace's voice shook the walls. It was the voice that made oil company executives tremble in boardrooms. She rushed forward, shoving Daniel aside with strength born from panic. She grabbed Blessing by the shoulders. Did he hurt you? Did he touch you? Blessing flinched at the sound. So loud, so sharp it hurt her newly awakened ear. But then she looked at her mother. Mama, Blessing said. Grace froze. Her designer handbag dropped to the floor with a thud. Her entire body went rigid. What? She whispered. Blessing reached up and touched her mother's face. Loud, she said, wincing slightly. You. Loud. Grace's legs buckled. She fell to her knees. You can hear me? But before the miracle could sink in, Grace's eyes landed on Daniel's open palm. The blood, the tweezers, the disgusting black mass sitting there. Terror overtook wonder. She didn't see a cure. She saw a gateman holding a weapon and a piece of her daughter. "Security!" she bellowed. "Mopol!" The two armed guards stepped forward, their AK-47s shifting. "Get him away from my child, now!" Daniel's heart shattered. "Madam, please, listen to me." "You are a gateman!" Grace roared, tears streaming down her face. A mix of hysteria and rage. "Not a doctor! You could have pierced her brain! You could have killed her!" The guards grabbed Daniel's arms, twisting them behind his back. Pain shot through his shoulders. Blessing screamed. Actually screamed. A raw, guttural sound of protest. "No, no, don't hurt him." The sound of her daughter's voice. Loud, desperate, real. Stopped Grace cold for a second. But the fear was too strong. 9 years of specialists saying, "Don't touch," was too deep. "Take him to the security post," Grace commanded, her voice shaking. "Call the DPO. I want him arrested for assault, for practicing medicine without a license." "No!" Blessing cried, grabbing at Daniel's leg. "It's okay, Blessing," Daniel said, even as the guards dragged him backward. He looked at the little girl. "You're okay now. You can hear. That's all that matters." "Move!" one guard shouted, shoving Daniel toward the door. As they dragged him away, Daniel looked back. He saw Grace clutching Blessing, rocking her. And he saw Blessing staring after him, sobbing. Loud, messy sobs. The first sounds of grief she'd ever made. Daniel was thrown into the back of a police Hilux. As the siren wailed, a sound he knew Blessing could now hear. He closed his eyes. He was going to prison. He'd lost his job. His sister would likely not get her treatment. But he remembered that word, tick, and he smiled in the darkness. The convoy of 3 armored land cruisers tore through the streets of Port Harcourt like black lightning. Sirens blared, Okada riders scattered, Kiki drivers swerved into gutters. Inside the middle vehicle, chaos reigned. Grace sat in the back, her chest heaving. She held Blessing tight against her silk blouse, her hands trembling. Blessing was curled into a ball, both hands clamped over her ears. She was crying, not from pain, from the sheer, terrifying violence of sound. For 9 years, Blessing had lived in a silent movie. Now the world was screaming at her. The roar of the engine, the wail of the siren, the honking of traffic, the static of the police radio crackling in the front seat. It was an assault. "Make it stop," Blessing sobbed, her voice thick and unfamiliar. "Too loud, Mama, too loud." Grace froze. That word, Mama, cut through her panic like a hot knife. She looked down at her daughter. "Driver, turn off the siren!" Grace screamed. "Turn it off!" The driver killed the siren instantly. The car became a quiet hum. Blessing slowly lowered her hands. She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. She blinked, tilting her head toward her mother's lips. "Yes," she whispered. "I can hear. Wind." She pointed to the air conditioning vent. Grace covered her mouth to stifle a sob. It was impossible. The gateman, the dirty, unauthorized gateman with blood on his hands, had done what the professors in Switzerland couldn't. But then the fear returned. What if he damaged something? What if this is temporary? What if he infected her? "Drive faster," Grace commanded, her voice hardening. "Get us to Yupth, now." At the divisional police headquarters in Old GRA, the atmosphere was very different. Daniel was shoved roughly through the front desk area. The station smelled of sweat, rusted metal, and stale puff-puff. The sergeant at the counter, a man with a belly that strained against his uniform, looked up lazily. "Wheaton beat us one offense?" the sergeant asked, picking his teeth with a splinter. "Attempted murder, assault on a minor, illegal medical practice," the Mopol officer barked. "Madam Okonkwo herself ordered the arrest." The sergeant whistled low. "Okonkwo, Oga, you don't enter big trouble. You go rot for cell." Daniel stood tall despite the handcuffs cutting into his wrists. He'd lost his shoes in the scuffle. His uniform was torn. "I didn't hurt her," Daniel said calmly. I helped her. Shut up. The mopple slapped the back of Daniel's head. Criminal. You unused the pike-in for ritual, Abby? We know your type. They stripped him of his belt, his wallet, and the small Bible he kept in his pocket. They shoved him down a dark corridor toward the holding cells. Please, Daniel said, his voice cracking. My sister, I need to make one call. She's in the hospital. If I don't send the deposit... You dey worry about sister when your own life don't spoil. The officer laughed. Enter inside. The cell door clanged shut. The finality of that sound echoed in Daniel's soul. The cell was crowded, dark, hot. 20 men sat on the bare concrete floor. The air was thick with despair. Daniel slid down the wall to a crouch. He buried his face in his hands. He'd done the right thing. He knew he had. So why was he here? Why was God silent? Tick, he whispered to himself. Tick. That one word had to be enough. At the University of Port Harcourt Teaching Hospital, a team of doctors swarmed around Blessing. Dr. Ibrahim, chief medical director and an old family friend, cleared the room. Everyone out. I want absolute silence. Dim the lights. Grace stood in the corner, arms crossed, nails digging into her skin. She watched as Dr. Ibrahim used a high-tech otoscope to examine Blessing's ear. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the medical equipment. Dr. Ibrahim looked. He frowned. He adjusted the magnification. Looked again. He pulled back, cleaned the lens, and looked a third time. Slowly, he set the instrument down and turned to face Grace. His face was pale. Grace, he said softly, who removed the obstruction? My gate man, she spat. He used dirty tweezers. Tell me the damage, Ibrahim. Will she get an infection? Did he rupture the eardrum? Dr. Ibrahim shook his head slowly. Grace, listen to me very carefully. The tympanic membrane is intact. It's perfect. It's healthy. Grace blinked. What? The obstruction, Dr. Ibrahim continued, his voice shaking with barely contained anger, wasn't a tumor. It wasn't nerve damage. It was a keratin plug, a massive calcified blockage of wax and debris, completely physical. I don't understand. Grace stepped forward. We went to London. We went to America. They said it was neurological. They said her nerves were dead. Dr. Ibrahim walked to his filing cabinet. He pulled out a thick folder. Blessing's medical history from overseas specialists. He flipped through aggressively. Look at this. He slapped an MRI film onto the lightbox. This is from the clinic in Boston, 3 years ago. He pointed to a dark shadow in the ear canal. I'm looking at it now with fresh eyes, Dr. Ibrahim said. See this density? They labeled it complex anatomical structure, high surgical risk. They coded it as permanent nerve damage to avoid liability. Speak plainly, Ibrahim. Dr. Ibrahim slammed his hand on the desk. They lied, Grace. The words hung in the air. They saw the blockage. They knew it was removable, but a blockage is a one-time procedure. You pay $10,000, they remove it, your daughter hears, you go home. End of transaction. He pointed at the stack of bills in the file. But permanent nerve damage? That requires therapy, monthly consultations, experimental drugs, hope, and hope is very, very expensive. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. Are you telling me my daughter has been deaf for 9 years because she had a plug of wax, and they left it there? They left it there because you're what we call a whale in the medical industry, Grace. A billionaire patient. You don't cure a whale, you milk it. Doctor. Ibrahim looked at Blessing, who was sitting on the examination table, humming softly, marveling at the sound of her own voice. Your gateman, Dr. Ibrahim said quietly, didn't just remove a blockage. He performed microsurgery with a pair of tweezers in a hallway. If he'd slipped 1 millimeter, he would have deafened her permanently, but he didn't. His voice dropped. He saved her life, Grace. Grace staggered backward. She hit the wall and slid down, covering her mouth. The memory crashed over her. The blood on Daniel's hands. The way she screamed at him. The way he looked at her. Not with anger, but with desperation. I didn't hurt her. I helped her. She'd thrown the only person who'd actually looked at her daughter into a cage. Oh, God, she whispered. What have I done? She stood abruptly. The lioness was back. But this time, her rage was directed at herself. Doctor, keep her here. Run every test. Make sure she's comfortable. Where are you going? Grace was already at the door. I have a mistake to fix. A massive one. The divisional police officer, Mr. Chukwu, was enjoying a plate of pepper soup in his office when the door flew open. He didn't even have time to shout, "Who is that?" before he saw her. Grace Okonkwo didn't look like a billionaire CEO right now. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes were wild. She radiated an energy that could power half of Port Harcourt. "Madam," Mr. Chukwu jumped up, wiping soup from his mouth. "We have processed the criminal. He's in the cell. The charge sheet is being prepared for tomorrow." "Bring him out," Grace said. Her voice was low, dangerous. "Ma?" "Bring him out, now." "Madam, it's late. The paperwork." "If you do not bring Daniel to the office in the next 2 minutes," Grace stepped closer, placing both hands on his desk, "I will call the commissioner of police. Then I will call the governor. And by tomorrow morning, this police station will be a parking lot for my trucks." Mr. Chukwu scrambled for his radio. "Bring the suspect, the gate man, fast." 3 minutes later, the door opened. Daniel was shoved into the room. He looked terrible. His lip was split, courtesy of a beating from the cell boss. He was barefoot. He smelled like the cell. He looked at Grace and flinched, expecting another explosion. He lowered his head. "Madam, I swear to you I—" "Leave us," Grace commanded the officers. "But madam, he's dangerous." "Out!" The DPO and his men scrambled out, closing the door. Silence filled the room. The air conditioner hummed. Grace looked at the man she'd hired to open her gates. She really looked at him for the first time. She saw the intelligence in his eyes, the gentleness in his hands, the quiet dignity in his posture. She walked toward him. Daniel braced himself. She stopped 2 feet away. Then the unthinkable happened. Grace Okonkwo, the woman who made oil executives cry in negotiations, sank to her knees. Daniel's eyes widened in horror. "Madam, no! What are you doing? Please stand up!" He tried to reach for her, but his hands were still cuffed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice broke. Tears dripped onto the dusty floor. "I'm so sorry." "Madam, please." Daniel was panicking. "You're the boss. You can't kneel for me." "I'm not the boss." She looked up at him, mascara running. "I'm a blind mother. You were the only one who saw. You saved my daughter, Daniel." She reached into her purse, pulled out a key, and unlocked his handcuffs herself. She threw them across the room. She took his rough, bruised hands in her manicured ones. "I judged you. I looked at your uniform and thought you were nothing. I looked at your hands and saw dirt. But God used these hands." Daniel stood there, stunned. He didn't know what to say. "Is Blessing okay?" he asked finally. Grace let out a wet laugh. "She's complaining that the hospital air conditioner is too loud. She's perfect. Because of you." She stood up, wiping her face. The businesswoman was returning, but changed, softened. "Let's go," she said. "Go where, madam? I'm fired." "You're not fired," she said firmly. "And you're certainly not a gate man anymore. Come with me." The ride back to the hospital was quiet. Daniel sat in the back of the Land Cruiser, sinking into the leather seats that still smelled new. He felt like he was dreaming. "Daniel." Grace broke the silence. "Why were you working as a gateman? You speak too well. The doctor said you have surgeon's hands." Daniel sighed, looking out the window at the Port Harcourt lights reflecting off the rivers and creeks. "I have a degree, madam. Microbiology from RSU, second class upper. I wanted to go to medical school, but money." He paused. "My sister has kidney failure. Dialysis costs N120,000 every week. I couldn't wait for a corporate job. I needed cash immediately. The gateman position paid weekly." Grace stared at him. "You took a job opening gates to save your sister." "She's all I have, madam, just like Blessing is all you have." Grace turned away, looking out her window. He didn't say anything, but she tapped a message on her phone. "Find out which hospital Daniel's sister is in. Pay the bill in full. Arrange a transplant if needed. Money is not an issue. When they walked into the hospital room, Blessing was sitting up in bed, eating a bowl of ice cream. She heard the footsteps. She turned her head, not because she felt vibration, but because she heard sound. "Daniel," she said. The word was clumsy but clear. Daniel's face lit up. He forgot about Grace. He forgot about the police. He forgot about everything. He ran to the bedside and knelt down. "Blessing," he said gently. "Can you hear me?" She grinned. "I can hear you." She reached out and touched his swollen lip. "Ouch?" she asked, wincing in sympathy. "Small ouch," he laughed. "I'm okay." Grace stood at the door watching them. She saw the bond. It wasn't just about the hearing. It was about love. Pure, selfless love. She cleared her throat. "Daniel." He stood up quickly, remembering his place. "Yes, madam." "Tomorrow morning you will not report to the gatehouse." Daniel nodded, expecting severance pay. "Yes, madam." "You will report to the Human Resources Department of Okonkwo Energy Limited." Daniel frowned. "Ma?" "I just fired my chief operations officer. He was useless anyway. But that position is too high for now. We'll start you as our health, safety, and environmental manager. The salary is substantial." Daniel's jaw dropped. "Madam, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. But that's just the day job." She stepped closer. "I'm setting up a foundation in Blessing's name. We're going to find every child in Nigeria who's been misdiagnosed by these greedy hospitals, and you, Daniel, are going to run it." "Me?" "You have the eyes for it," she smiled. "You see what others miss." She paused. "And your sister has been transferred to the VIP wing of this hospital. Her transplant surgery is scheduled for next week. The donor has been secured. Everything is arranged." Daniel's legs gave out. He grabbed the bed to steady himself. He looked at Grace, then at Blessing. "Why?" he choked out. "Because you gave me back my daughter's voice," Grace said softly. "My money means nothing if I can't use it to say thank you." 6 months later, the garden of the Okonkwo estate was no longer silent. Music played. Soft high life, blending with laughter. It was Blessing's 10th birthday party. Children ran screaming across the lawn, playing tag and hide and seek. In the middle of them was Blessing, laughing louder than anyone. She stopped running when she heard a familiar sound. The heavy iron gates were opening. A black car rolled in. But Daniel wasn't opening the gate. He was sitting in the back seat of the car. He stepped out wearing a sharp navy suit. He looked transformed, confident, purposeful. He walked toward the garden. Blessing saw him and sprinted. "Uncle Daniel!" she screamed. A beautiful, piercing scream that made Grace smile from the veranda. Blessing jumped into his arms. Daniel spun her around, laughing. "Happy birthday, princess," he said, putting her down. "Did you hear the music?" she asked excitedly, pulling his ear. "Did you?" "I heard it," he laughed. "Every note." Grace walked down the stairs to meet them. She shook Daniel's hand warmly. "The foundation just got approval for the new clinic in LMA," Daniel reported, his eyes shining. "We found 4 children yesterday. Same condition as Blessing. Surgeries are scheduled for Monday." "Excellent," Grace nodded. "Very good." She looked at her daughter, who was now dancing to the music, spinning in circles, drinking in every sound, every beat. Grace looked at Daniel. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I spent hundreds of millions searching for a miracle overseas. I didn't realize the miracle was standing at my gate the whole time." Daniel smiled, watching Blessing dance. "My grandmother used to say something, madam." "What?" "God doesn't always shout. Sometimes he whispers." He tapped his ear. "And sometimes he hides the answer in plain sight, waiting for someone willing to look past a uniform to find it." Blessing laughed across the garden, a sound like bells, loud and clear. Grace whispered, "Loud and clear." And for the first time in the history of the Okonkwo mansion, the silence was gone, replaced by the beautiful, chaotic symphony of life. "Before we wrap up, I want to ask you something. Have you ever judged someone based on their job or appearance, only to later realize they had something incredible to offer? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you that miracles don't always come wrapped in expensive packages, then do me a favor. Subscribe to Breeze Tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Leave a like if you felt something today. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones God sends to change our lives. Until next time, keep believing, keep looking beyond the surface, and remember, the answer you're searching for might be closer than you think.